A few days ago saw Garmin push a very rare firmware update to the RTL510 Radar/Lite device. There are two main updates for version 3.7 from 3.5. They are listed here. Number one being improved radar handling of very high traffic environments. The radar does get very chirpy in high traffic environments. It's not really suited for high traffic urban areas because there's a lot of things that will be approaching you from behind. So they've improved that somehow. I haven't tested it yet. The traffic volume here in Ballarat is quite low during the Christmas period. Number two, improved radar target speed reporting. The radar will detect what speed objects are coming at it. Things coming at it quite fast will appear typically as red on your head unit, or things at normal speed will be orange. So I guess they've improved the handling of that. Now there are two ways to update the firmware on the Varia Radar RTL510. First of all, if you have a compatible Garmin EDGE unit paired with your RTL510 as a sensor, it should, in theory, pull down the sensor firmware and install the firmware on next boot. You may have seen a little message pop up saying sensor firmware available, do you want to update? Yes, it'll take a few minutes and away you go. So those things go hand in hand. Garmin, it's happy days. Secondly, if you have a non-Garmin device, such as a Wahoo Roam or a Bolt or an Element which does support the Varia Radar, it won't do the firmware update automatically. You'll need to pull out a USB cable, plug it into Garmin Express, and make sure the update is done that way. So to force the update on my Varia Radar 510, it's out with the cable and over to Garmin Express. Loading up Garmin Express here on the Mac, latest version. All my registered devices pop up here like a Christmas tree of updates. Now clicking on the Varia Radar, which I do have plugged in via USB, and it does alert me there are updates here to install to version 3.70. There's updates for the Lite and the radar and device software. Not quite sure the difference on all of those in particular, but we just hit install all. We hit accept to the terms and conditions. We read through all this, of course we did, and we hit continue. The second stage of this process is to disconnect the radar, turn it on, where it will complete the installation of the firmware, and then we reconnect the device to make sure it's all happy. So here we are, we're disconnected, waited for it to boot up, reconnected, and boom, we are now up to date. Happy days. Now for good measure, I pulled out the RTL500, the older version of the radar that I have, which I've never connected. I thought I'd add it as a device to my Garmin Express, register the product here, and just check for updates, because I've never checked for updates on this thing. So we'll call this Llama RTL500. We'll hit next. Lo and behold, there's a firmware update for this. Now this may not be a new firmware, but it is newer than what's on the unit out of the box. So a list of changes there. Definitely worth doing. If Garmin are going to put an update out, definitely worth me installing. Here we go. We go through next. It puts the files onto the unit. It then requires a disconnection, a boot up, which will take a minute or two, and then it will start up again with the new firmware. So there we are, all updated on the RTL510 with the latest firmware, and my older unit, which hadn't been updated, is now on the latest as well. So for this one here, the newer Varia Radar, that's 3.7, you want to be on for firmware there, and for this one, the RTL500, 3.8 is the firmware you want to be on for that too. Garmin Express is also a brilliant way to keep other Garmin devices up to date with updates that don't push over the air, such as maps to your watch or maps to these units as well. I'll cover that in another video soon. So there we are for today. If you owned an RTL510, one of these new Varia radars, spend a few minutes, do the update to get the most out of the device. If you own one of the older units and you haven't checked that firmware update for a while, again, plug it in, Garmin Express, make sure you're in the latest version. And if you're not familiar with what these units do, I'll link below to my video which covers my initial first look at this. It's an absolute game changer for the roads that I ride and the riding that I do, especially during the festive 500 where there's a lot of solo Ks, long open roads. These things got my back. I absolutely love this device, and when that goes flat and I'm running out the door, I've got that as a backup as well. Links below to these units over on Amazon. As always, hit subscribe below to be alerted of new videos coming up, and hit that join to become a member of the GPLama YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.